Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it quietly, like it was a house rule everyone already knew. No touching in front of my family. She didn't look at me when she said it. Her eyes were on her sister, on the kitchen island, on the casual choreography of a Sunday afternoon that had nothing to do with us. I stood there with my hand halfway toward her back, then let it drop like I'd reached for something that wasn't mine. That was the moment I realized I'd already been demoted. I just hadn't been told. Her name is Emily. My name is Mark. I design automated systems for factories, machines that only work when every boundary is precise. At home, precision had become a liability. Emily worked events, weddings, corporate retreats, family gatherings where everything looked warm, intentional, and curated. Our house had started to feel like one of her venues. Perfect lighting, no intimacy. That afternoon her parents were over, along with her brother and his wife. Jason was there too. He always was. A family friend, realtor, the kind of guy everyone trusted because he'd been around forever. He leaned against the counter like he belonged there more than I did, joking with her dad, refilling drinks without asking. I noticed how close he stood to Emily. Not touching, never touching, just close enough to register. Later, we all piled into the garage to unload groceries from Costco. I followed behind, pushing the cart, listening to them talk over me. I wasn't included or excluded. I was just present, like a neighbor who came along. Inside, the house smelled like one of those Bath and Body Works candles she loved. Something warm and artificial, designed to suggest comfort without requiring it. The TV was already on, Disney Plus humming in the background for the kids, though no one was watching. Emily sat at the far end of the couch, angled away from me, knees tucked in, phone in her hand. Jason took the seat closer to her. Still not touching. I sat on the armchair instead, not out of spite, out of clarity. No one noticed the shift. That was the part that stayed with me. I could disappear inches at a time, and the room would adjust. The conversation kept flowing. The laughter didn't miss a beat. That night, lying in bed beside her, I replayed the sentence again and again. No touching in front of my family. It wasn't about boundaries. It was about ownership. And I understood something else, just as clearly. If I stayed where I wasn't allowed to reach, I would eventually forget what it felt like to be held at all. The first crack didn't come from her. It came from someone who had no reason to lie to me. 2 days later, I was back at work, watching a conveyor system cycle through a test run for the 5th time. Perfect repetition. Predictable behavior. The kind of order I trusted. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I didn't check it right away. When I finally did, it wasn't Emily. It was her cousin, Rachel. She didn't accuse. She didn't explain. She just asked if everything was okay between me and Emily. The question sat there, oddly weighted, like it had been carried across a room before reaching me. Rachel had always been careful with words. That's why the timing mattered. She'd never reached out before unless Emily had asked her to. This time, she hadn't. I told her everything was fine. Because that's what people say when they haven't caught up to the truth yet. That evening, Emily came home later than usual. She said she'd grabbed a quick dinner with her parents. I didn't ask where. She volunteered that it was Chick-fil-A, said it casually, like details built trust. She smelled like peppermint gum and cold air. She didn't sit next to me. She stood while she talked, keys still in her hand. Jason's name came up. Not directly, just mentioned as part of the day, like weather. I watched how smoothly she did it, how easily he fit into sentences that weren't about him. Later that night, while she showered, her phone lit up on the nightstand. No message preview, just a name. Jason. The screen went dark before I could think about what I was seeing. I didn't touch the phone. That mattered to me. I didn't want to cross a line that would pull me into something emotional. I wanted to stay where the information stayed clean. Over the next week, I noticed patterns. Nothing dramatic, just timing. Her leaving early on days she used to linger. Her being oddly energized after family gatherings where I felt invisible. Jason always there, always helpful, always approved. At another get-together, I arrived separately. Work, I said. True, but incomplete. The room adjusted again. People greeted me warmly, then turned back to their conversations. Emily smiled from across the room, polite and distant, like I was a guest who'd come later than expected. Jason stood beside her, laughing softly. Still no touching. That's when it settled in. Whatever was happening wasn't impulsive. It was maintained, protected by routine and familiarity, hidden in plain sight. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions that would force answers she was ready to lie through. Instead, I stopped trying to feel included. And for the first time, I started watching instead of waiting. Once I stopped waiting to be chosen, the information came faster. It wasn't one dramatic discovery. It was a series of small confirmations that lined up too neatly to ignore. I designed systems for a living, and systems don't lie. People do. Emily became careless in ways that only happen when someone feels safe. Not loved. Safe. Her calendar stayed open on the kitchen counter one morning, notifications stacked on top of each other. Family brunch. Vendor call. Walkthrough. Jason's name again, abbreviated, slipped between legitimate entries like it belonged there. I didn't ask about it. I asked fewer things in general. Instead, I started tracking what didn't match. Her expenses shifted. Nothing outrageous, just patterns. More coffee stops. More quick meals that didn't involve me. She said she ate with family, but receipts told a slightly different story. Same locations. Same times. Always overlapping with his schedule. One night, she fell asleep on the couch while Disney Plus played something neither of us was watching. Her phone slipped from her hand onto the cushion. I picked it up to move it so it wouldn't fall. That was it. I didn't unlock it. I didn't scroll. The screen lit up again before it went dark. A preview this time. Just a line. Something casual. Something intimate enough to assume privacy. I put the phone back exactly where it was. That was the moment my face changed. Not visibly. Not in a way she noticed. But something set. Like a decision made without emotion. I didn't feel anger. I felt alignment. The same feeling I get when a complex system finally makes sense. After that, I moved quietly. I upgraded my headphones at Best Buy, told her the old ones were failing. I didn't explain why I suddenly wanted noise cancellation in a house that had never been loud. I started spending evenings in the spare room with my laptop, working later, testing things, staying deliberately unavailable. She didn't question it. That was the most telling part. At the next family gathering, I stayed for exactly 40 minutes. Long enough to be seen. Short enough to avoid being absorbed. Emily glanced at me once, surprised, as I grabbed my jacket. Jason watched me leave, his smile polite, his posture unchanged. In the car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. Not to calm down, to confirm something. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was repositioning. And once I accepted that whatever she was protecting didn't include me, the rules became simple. I didn't need proof for a confrontation. I needed clarity for a separation that hadn't been announced yet. I didn't disappear all at once. I thinned out. That's the mistake people make when they think absence has to be dramatic. It doesn't. It just has to be consistent. Predictable in its withdrawal. The first thing I removed was my timing. I stopped syncing my schedule to hers. I left earlier. Came back later. Not randomly, but deliberately enough that she couldn't adjust around me. I'd arrive home after dinner, the house already settled into its evening rhythm without me. Disney Plus glowing in the living room. Her legs tucked under her. Jason's name occasionally drifting through a story she assumed I wasn't listening to. When weekends came, I stopped doing the shared routines. No more joint Costco runs where I walked half a step behind, pushing the cart while she greeted people like she was hosting an open house. I went alone early in the morning, or not at all. When she asked if I was coming, I said I'd already taken care of it. She didn't press. She never did when something benefited her sense of order. The second thing I removed was access. I changed passwords. Not out of fear, but out of principle. My laptop stayed with me. My phone stayed face down. I spent more time in the spare room, headphones on, working or not working, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was unavailable without explanation. She noticed the silence before she noticed the distance. She asked once if everything was okay. I said yes. That answer still belonged to me. The third thing I removed was transportation. One morning, I didn't pull into the driveway when I got home. I parked a few streets away and walked. A test. By the end of the week, I stopped driving the route that took me past her parents' house. I stopped offering rides. Eventually, I stopped showing up at all unless I chose to. The Tesla Model 3 made it easy. Quiet. Unremarkable. It didn't announce departures. It just wasn't there. Emily started filling the gaps with explanations for other people. Work. Stress. Projects. She smoothed it over the way she always did. lighting another Bath and Body Works candle, resetting the atmosphere like scent could substitute presence. What changed was her tone. Messages came quicker, then closer together, then with questions attached. Not accusations. Confusion. She wasn't angry yet. She was recalculating. At a family dinner, I arrived separately again. Stayed less than an hour. Left before dessert. No argument. No scene. Just a nod to the room and a quiet exit. I didn't look back to see who noticed, because I already knew the effect. When someone who used to be constant becomes optional by choice, the room doesn't panic. It pauses. And that pause was exactly where I wanted her to sit. Jason started unraveling without realizing I'd touched anything at all. People like him rely on atmosphere, familiarity, the assumption that everyone in the room agrees on who belongs where. When that atmosphere shifts, even slightly, the cracks show. I didn't confront him. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't need to. All I did was stop reinforcing the illusion. At the next extended family gathering, I showed up alone again. Later than expected. I didn't explain. I stayed near the edge of the room, answering questions politely, leaving space after every sentence. Engineers learn early that silence invites inspection. People filled it for me. Someone asked where Emily was. I said she was running late. True. Incomplete. Someone else mentioned Jason's new listing. I nodded, neutral. I didn't compliment it the way I used to. I didn't support the story. I just let it pass through me. That's when I noticed how often his name came up without him being present. How much he depended on being vouched for. How much Emily did that work for him without knowing she was doing it. Later that week, I forwarded a document to a mutual acquaintance. Nothing dramatic. Just a discrepancy I'd noticed months earlier and never mentioned. Dates that didn't align. A signature that didn't quite match the timing he claimed. I didn't accuse. I asked a question. Questions travel faster than accusations. I stayed out of it after that. Completely. Whatever followed didn't come from me. It came from people comparing notes. From conversations I wasn't part of. From a slow recalibration of trust. Emily felt it before she understood it. Her phone was always in her hand now. Her movements sharper. Her tone lighter in public, tighter in private. She burned through candles faster, like scent could stabilize something that was quietly tilting. Bath and Body Works had become a rotation, not a ritual. She asked if I was coming with her to see her parents that weekend. I said I'd meet them later. I didn't. Instead, I worked from a cafe, headphones on, watching the hours move without me being needed. When I came home, the house felt staged. Disney Plus paused. Dinner untouched. She was waiting without saying she was waiting. Jason stopped coming around as much. When he did, it was brief. Controlled. He didn't linger. He didn't laugh as loudly. He didn't look at me at all. That told me everything. I hadn't attacked him. I hadn't exposed him. I hadn't needed to. I'd removed the structure that made him invisible. And without that structure, people started seeing him clearly for the first time. Emily noticed the shift last. By then, it was already too late for explanations. The shift became visible to other people before Emily admitted it to herself. It happened at her mother's birthday dinner, one of those gatherings planned weeks in advance and treated like a small production. I arrived alone again, parked farther down the street, walked in without checking if anyone noticed. The room was already full, voices overlapping, glasses clinking. Emily looked up when she saw me, just for a second. Surprise flickered, then something tighter. Jason wasn't there. That absence carried weight. Someone asked about him within the first 10 minutes. Not loudly. Casually. Emily answered smoothly, but the timing was off. A half beat too late. Her explanation landed and slid instead of settling. I sat where there was space, not where I used to sit. I didn't anchor myself next to her. I didn't lean in. I didn't play the role people expected. I spoke when spoken to, then let the conversation move on without me. For the first time, people started turning their bodies toward me instead of past me. Her aunt asked how work was going. I answered simply. No updates about we. Just me. That seemed to register. A few glances passed between people who'd known us a long time. Dinner went on. Someone mentioned how quiet things felt lately. Someone else laughed and said maybe the holidays were catching up to everyone. Emily smiled, but her shoulders stayed tense. She kept checking her phone, then setting it down again, face up. Later, when dessert was brought out, someone finally said it. Not harshly, almost gently. That comment about how I seemed different. More distant. like I'd been slipping out early a lot. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I let the observation exist. Emily answered for me. She always did. But this time, the room didn't fully follow her lead. The silence afterward stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable. When I left, I didn't announce it. I said my goodbyes individually. Polite. Calm. When I reached the door, her mother hugged me longer than usual. That wasn't accidental. In the car, I sat for a moment before pulling away, watching the house through the rearview mirror. I could picture Emily inside, answering questions that hadn't been asked directly, holding the evening together with effort instead of ease. When I got home later, the house was quiet. The familiar smell of a Bath and Body Works candle lingered, but it felt wrong now, like a set after the audience had left. Emily didn't say anything that night, but the next morning, she woke up already behind. And for the first time, the distance wasn't invisible anymore. Other people could feel it. And once they could feel it, she could no longer control the narrative alone. Isolation doesn't arrive loudly. It settles in quietly, like furniture being removed one piece at a time. Emily started noticing it in the spaces between things. Conversations that used to carry her now stopped short. Invitations came later, if at all. When they did, they were vague. She compensated the way she always had, by filling the house with signals of normalcy. Fresh groceries. Rearranged shelves. Another Bath and Body Works candle lit in the evening, layered over the last one, as if warmth could be stacked. I stayed present but unreachable. I still slept in the house. I still answered questions. I still showed up when it made sense. But I no longer lingered. I no longer softened moments for her. When she talked, I listened without stepping in to rescue the silence afterward. That was new for her. She was used to me bridging gaps she didn't want to cross. Jason faded almost completely. When his name came up now, it landed awkwardly, like a reference no one wanted to expand on. The family adjusted without commentary. That's how these things happen. No confrontation. Just a collective step back. Emily tried to anchor herself to routine. Family movie nights returned. Disney Plus glowing in the living room. Blankets arranged just right. I sat at the edge of the couch, polite, attentive, emotionally absent. She leaned toward me once, barely noticeable, then pulled back when I didn't respond. That was the moment she realized the distance wasn't punishment. It was permanent. She asked if I wanted to talk. I said I was listening. She talked around the subject, not through it. She mentioned stress, timing, misunderstandings. She didn't mention Jason. She didn't mention touch. She didn't mention the rule she'd created and enforced without discussion. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct her. I didn't validate the narrative she needed to believe. Instead, I kept my life segmented. Work stayed at work. Evenings belonged to me. I drove aimlessly some nights, not to escape, but to think without being watched. I returned home later than expected, always calm, always consistent. People noticed. Her sister asked if everything was okay. Her mother stopped asking me when I was coming over and started asking if I'd already eaten. Those are different questions. Emily felt the loss of access more than the loss of affection. She reached for me in small ways, shared memories, logistical questions, soft tone. None of it landed. Because she'd closed intimacy with rules. I'd closed connection with boundaries. And unlike hers, mine didn't need to be announced to be enforced. By the end of that week, she wasn't just alone in the room. She was alone in the story she'd been telling everyone about us. And there was no one left to help her edit it. She chose a quiet evening to confront me. That was intentional. The house was unusually still, the kind of silence that only happens when someone has already rehearsed what they're going to say. No TV, no candles lit, no background noise to soften edges. She waited until I finished what I was doing and sat across from me, hands folded, posture careful. She didn't accuse. She asked questions shaped like concern. She wanted to know when we'd started living parallel lives. She wanted to know why I wasn't coming with her anymore, why I felt so far away while still being right there. She said it felt like I'd already left, even though my shoes were still by the door. I let her speak until she ran out of language. When I answered, I kept it short. Not cold. Controlled. I told her I was exactly where I'd been placed. That I hadn't moved first. That distance doesn't begin with absence. It begins with rules that make one person smaller in public and quieter in private. Her face shifted when she understood what I meant. Not because I'd said anything harsh, but because I hadn't softened it. She tried to respond, but the rhythm was gone. She'd expected emotion. She'd prepared for defense. What she got was finality without volume. She reached for a reason that would bring Jason into the conversation without naming him. I didn't follow her there. I didn't need to. Whatever she was trying to protect no longer had relevance to my decisions. I told her I wasn't angry. That mattered to her more than I expected. Anger would have meant engagement. Anger could be negotiated. Calm meant I'd already processed what she was still trying to frame. She asked if I still wanted this marriage. I said I wanted honesty more than proximity. That access without respect wasn't something I was willing to perform anymore. After that, there wasn't much left to say. I stood up first. Not to leave the house. Just to leave the conversation. I picked up my headphones, the ones I'd bought at Best Buy weeks earlier, and went into the spare room. Closed the door. Not hard. Just enough. She didn't follow. That was the confirmation. Confrontations usually end with resolution or escalation. This one ended with separation that didn't need to be negotiated. We slept under the same roof that night, but the house felt larger, emptier, more defined. In the morning, she tried to return to routine. Asked practical questions. Offered logistics. I answered when necessary, politely, briefly. She wasn't losing me loudly. She was losing access. And for the first time, she understood those were not the same thing at all. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It came in fragments, spaced just far enough apart that she couldn't brace for them. First, it was social. Invitations stopped being automatic. Family plans were made without looping her in early. She found out about things after they'd already settled, when there was no room to adjust the seating or the story. She tried to laugh it off, tried to act unbothered, but her timing was off now. She was reacting instead of directing. Then it was practical. Routines she'd leaned on quietly shifted. Her parents grabbed Chick-fil-A on nights she used to coordinate dinners. Someone else brought dessert. Someone else filled space she'd always managed. Not maliciously, just efficiently. The world kept moving without waiting for her cues. At home, the imbalance became impossible to ignore. The house was still full of familiar signals: candles, folded blankets, the TV glowing with Disney Plus menus. But they felt hollow, like props after a show closed early. I moved through it calmly, deliberately, as if I were already visiting rather than residing. She started remembering things she'd dismissed before. Small moments. Me standing quietly behind her at Costco while she chatted ahead. Me sitting on the edge of the couch while conversations flowed around me. My hand stopping mid-reach because she'd already decided how close I was allowed to be. Those memories didn't come all at once. They arrived in waves, triggered by silence. By the absence of someone stepping in to stabilize the room. Jason disappeared completely. Not announced. Not explained. Just gone from the orbit. Whatever credibility he'd relied on collapsed under its own weight. And without me reinforcing his presence, there was nothing left to hold him there. Emily never said his name again. She tried once more to reach me, not emotionally, but historically. She referenced trips. Inside jokes. Plans we'd once made. I listened, unmoved. Nostalgia is only powerful when both people are still standing in the same place. I wasn't. By the end of that week, she looked different. Not broken. Exposed. The kind of exposure that comes when control slips and there's no script to fall back on. She wasn't being punished. She was being left behind by a version of me that no longer existed. I packed slowly. Not everything. Just enough. Clothes. Work equipment. Personal space. The morning I left, the driveway was empty when she came outside. No sound. No explanation. Just absence where presence had once been guaranteed. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. And this time, there was no one left to soften the impact for her. By New Year's Eve, the silence had weight. Not the awkward kind. The kind that settles after everything unnecessary has been stripped away. I wasn't gone from her world. That was the part she struggled with most. I still existed. Still answered messages when they were practical. Still showed up when coordination required it. But I no longer filled emotional gaps. I no longer buffered her from the consequences of distance she'd normalized. She saw it first in other people's eyes. At a small family gathering before the holiday, she arrived alone. Not late. Just alone. She carried herself carefully, like someone walking through a room they used to control. Conversations paused, then resumed. No one was rude. No one asked questions. That was worse. Curiosity had been replaced with quiet recognition. She caught fragments of her own story reflected back at her, rearranged. Comments about how I'd always been steady, how reliable I was, how calm. Things that used to sound ordinary now landed like missed chances. That night, she drove home and sat in the driveway longer than necessary. The house didn't greet her the way it used to. The familiar routines felt oversized without someone anchoring them. Even the bags from Costco sitting by the door looked out of place, like props ordered too late. She reached out one last time before midnight. Not to argue, not to defend, to acknowledge. She said she finally understood when things had shifted, that the rule she'd set had been the first withdrawal, that everything after had just been me responding with clarity instead of noise. I listened. I didn't interrupt. She asked if there was anything left to save. I didn't answer right away. What I told her was simple, that I hadn't left to punish her, that I hadn't stayed to control her, that I'd stepped back to preserve something she'd already stopped protecting. That respect isn't rebuilt by proximity, but by behavior. I told her that if anything existed going forward, it wouldn't look like before. There would be no performance, no curated image, no public distance paired with private expectations. Access would be mutual, or it wouldn't exist at all. She didn't cry. She didn't bargain. She understood. When midnight came, I wasn't beside her. I was exactly where I'd chosen to be, watching fireworks reflect off the windshield of my car, the city quiet for once. No celebration, just clarity. I didn't disappear. I became unavailable to a version of life where I was treated like a background feature. And that was the only resolution that mattered. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.